For those of you who think you had it hard, we had the bus ride back on Sunday night. Luke Jones and I bringing back a hearty bunch of souls. We had a great time. Really nice people joined us for our trip up to MetLife Stadium on Sunday, but not happy folks. And, for 30 different opinions from 30 different people in many different ways and out on the internet, Luke, there is so much meat on the bone here on the back end of this. Not even talking about the injuries in the game but moving forward, like what happens now with this Jets game? What happens now with the pass rush in the hours afterward? The Terrell Suggs fallout and just more. I mean, the infirmary report has gotten. I mean, they did okay the first 3 weeks. Now it's gotten crazy again, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the story of the first few weeks. I mean, you're waiting for Doomerville to get back, but beyond that, they had been pretty healthy, and you saw
Stanley was the first one, right? I mean,
it was representative of what the roster was supposed to look like, other than Doomerville, which is a big loss, no doubt about it. But it has really snowballed once again, and feeling a lot like 2015. Now, the season-ending injuries haven't necessarily come, and we'll wait to see how this plays out with Terrell Suggs. But multiple outlets reported Sunday night torn biceps. The initial diagnosis is not a season-ending injury. Really, the difference, and I'm not a doctor. I'll be full disclosure there. But my understanding with those types of injuries, it's all about whether, is it just the muscle? And if that's the case, you can play through it, as Terrell Suggs did with a right biceps tear late in the 2012 season. Missed one game, I believe it was the Washington game in Week 14 that year, and then played with it the rest of the season. But if there's damage to the tendon itself, I think that's then when surgery is typically required, and that would be looking at a long-term, if not season-ending, kind of prognosis. So we'll wait to see.
Well, either way, it doesn't bode well for his productivity in the near future.
Oh, sure.
Either way, right?
Yeah, and
if this team has an Achilles heel, aside from the pass rush really has been a problem here. Real problem.
Well, I mean, they have lots of Achilles. They have lots of Achilles heels right now. But yeah, I mean, that's the defense that had played so well despite not having a pass rush through the first 5 games of the season. That really came to a head, especially with the Jimmy Smith injury right before halftime. But it doesn't bode well. You're right. I mean, Suggs, to his credit, unlike the young guys that the Ravens are still waiting to step forward, and it hasn't happened to this point, he at least has collected some sacks. He's at least flashed. Now, it hasn't been the same Terrell Suggs of old, which, he just turned 34 years old. So I don't know how realistic you can be to expect him to be the guy that he was way back when, but certainly not good news, especially on the heels of Elvis Doomerville being shut down once again last week. Based on what I've heard about that, I'd be surprised if we see him until after the bye, before the bye. And we'll have to just see how he progresses from there with the foot and ankle strength just not being there after off-season surgery. But this is the injuries, the bad coaching decisions that we've seen over the last several weeks, the penalties. It's all just piling up. And I said to you on the bus ride home, just thinking about this team, thinking about this organization from the front office down. It's just they're in like this malaise of mediocrity that they just can't shake. They're not bad. We
they're certainly not an embarrassment. We don't sit the offseason here saying how they're going to win 4 games, right?
But at the same time, and a lot of people will point to this, and I've already heard some people talk about this. 2009 was the last time they had started 3-0, and then they lost 3 straight after that. But those 3 straight were at New England, home against Cincinnati, at Minnesota. Those were 3 playoff teams that year, and they were all close losses. Two of them.
The Minnesota game was brutal. Hauschka missed that kick.
Yeah. So, but then you look at this, and look, I know people always kind of rub their nose, turn up their nose at the eyeball test, but that's what you look at in trying to evaluate what a team is moving forward. And we all talked about the fact that they were 3-0, but they were all narrow victories. They were against teams that at the time didn't look so good, and certainly that narrative can change as time goes on.
Well, it has for Buffalo at least.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. But, certainly at the time, didn't look all that impressive. And, we all said, okay, well, let's see how they do the next few weeks. And, that 3-0 start feels like a long time ago now. 3-3 and going to be banged up. Based on the reports, Suggs at least won't play against the Jets. And you wonder about Steve Smith. You wonder about Yanda, who we know does not miss games unless there's a fairly significant injury. So you wonder about that shoulder, if he's going to play before the bye. There are a lot of guys out right now, and a lot of guys that they're really counting on. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys are older players, and that's kind of the risk you run when you are so dependent on players on the wrong side of 30, as this roster is right now. And just comes down to it. They're, instead of finding ways to win, they're finding ways to lose right now, and the injury excuse can only go so far. But it is part of it. You can't just be completely dismissive of it either. And again, it's just adding up all of these deficiencies, the injuries, penalties, self-inflicted bad decisions by the coaching staff, giving up huge plays on Sunday, which they really hadn't done, to the defense's credit, through the first 5 weeks. But that all adds up to being a mediocre football team at 3-3. And doesn't mean the season's over, and certainly we can get into...
It is amazing, though. They were one play, right? Fourth down. I mean, they get off the field, they win the football game, and we're talking... I mean, and instead, it's like the sky's falling because... They're all of these things that you've bunched up. I mean, I'm listing them, Suggs and Dumerville and the pass rush and the coaching and the penalties, and Flacco hasn't been very good, and the O-line is a bunch of second-teamers, and the wide receivers aren't getting separate. I mean, we could have through the list, but they were this close to being 4-2. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, but, that's the league, though.
It is the league.
I mean, and that's what...
Every year.
I don't disagree with you, by the way, but... My point in saying that is just because that's been the way that it's played out doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to start winning all those games either. I mean, go back.
Yeah, you won a couple of them in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah. So it kind of adds up to being a 500 team. You're in every game. You win some of those, you lose some of those.
You win some, lose some. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I don't think it's some big mystery. I mean, this team needs to get a lot better. I mean, if they want to get to the playoffs, and look, it's going to help, and everyone's going to point to this, and rightfully so. Pittsburgh loses on Sunday. Ben Roethlisberger having a meniscus procedure. For now, they're saying it's just a trim, which would mean he'd only miss a couple weeks. I know there are byes coming up before they'll play the Ravens then, but that certainly leaves them very, very vulnerable with Landry Jones as their quarterback, at least against New England next week. And we'll see when Roethlisberger can return. Cincinnati loses again.
Oh, that's right. We're rooting for the Patriots next week. I forgot.
This division's wide open. It is, but at the same time, you can't keep pointing to that or keep pointing to the injuries without acknowledging that you got to take care of your own house here at some point. And there's a lot not to like about this team right now. And again, that's not to say they're going 4-12 or anything crazy like that, but there are a lot of problems top to bottom. And I'll go back to the fact that you saw what Odell Beckham Jr. was able to do on Sunday. The Ravens don't have any players who are capable of doing that. And look, Beckham doesn't. Guys like that don't grow on trees. But at some point, there was a time not long ago, and it's getting to be long ago, I guess I should say. But Ed Reed was the kind of guy that could do what Odell Beckham did on Sunday. I mean, it could bail you out, could give you a win, basically, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, so to speak, where you just come up with one or two enormous plays to kind of cover up your deficiencies elsewhere. And the Ravens they don't have guys that can consistently do that. That's not to say they don't have guys that never make plays. I mean, Joe Flacco threw a beautiful ball to Mike Wallace to set him up inside the 5-yard line. Now, problem is they couldn't finish off the drive with the touchdown then. It's just you need to have that when you're playing all these close games. Got to have some great players you can lean on. And I've said this for a couple years now. This isn't me just saying this after Sunday's loss. You know that, Nestor. This team lacks great players. This team lacks playmakers. John Harbaugh has even acknowledged over the last year they're looking for guys to be consistent playmakers, and guys flash from time to time, but there's not enough of that, and that's what cost you in these close games. And what is disheartening about this is these were 3 winnable games against. I think Oakland's good. I'm not convinced that Washington or the Giants are any good, though. And to lose 3 in a row when you're talking about that, 2 of those games being at home, that's disheartening, regardless of who was playing, who wasn't playing, and all the other noise that you can kind of talk about. This team just hasn't been good enough.
He is Luke Jones. Luke at WNST.net reaches him. He's also Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, where we were quite active on Sunday. Coaching mistakes. I think I'm going to move that to the top of the list because you've alluded to it 2 or 3 times. I haven't seen that on my Facebook page yet or anything, but, the Harbaugh, and look, I'm a John guy. I don't need to see the end of his era. I don't need to see people canned if this team goes 7-9 and does so without Suggs, without Doomerville, without Jimmy Smith. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, and part of that is going to be where's Ozzie in drafting these guys, and part of this is going to be where's Bisciotti in the life cycle of this. I mean, we just left Giant Stadium where they threw Tom Coughlin out, right? I mean, Bisciotti threw Billick out a year after a 13-3 season and with money left on the deal. So I don't know that it's not off the table for me that could happen, but I think a lot of things would have to conspire. I think it's real young to be thinking that this is the beginning of the insurrection, but I'm also not foolish about where they stand, and as you say, stuck in the mud with some older players, with a $125 million quarterback, with a bunch of injuries, with a very, very clear record now over the last 5 or 6 years of not drafting as well as they need to, as they used to, as they could. And then part of that's been some luck with Kindle and Perryman not getting on the field. Now we're getting up on that with Ronnie Stanley as to at what point he'll get on the field and look like a first-round draft pick again. That's still up in the air. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but, let's pop the zit at the top, right? The zit at the top is Ozzie and John and the personnel and the coaching, and that needs to be evaluated, especially when the coaching is glaring with, I don't want to say mistakes, bad moves. They're bad when they don't work out. When you go on the 1-yard line and you don't make it, it's bad. So Terrence West pushes it in, it's good. I know enough about that over 21 years, but there's some openings here for second guessing, Luke, and there's plenty of that goes on when you lose in the Meadowlands in the fashion that they lost on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, this is multi-layered. I mean, so many people want to just blame the coaching. And look, my story after last week's loss was about the coaching decisions and about how I thought that fake field goal with Justin Tucker was, frankly, one of the dumbest things I've ever seen out of a Ravens coaching staff. I mean, I'll still never defend that. That was just, it was dumb.
And it was only the second dumbest thing that happened last week in Baltimore sports.
Well, I mean, yeah, right. We talked about that quite a bit. But
well, it's true, but I mean, he wouldn't do that again, right?
You would hope not. You would certainly hope not. As far as Sunday goes, look, I said it at the time, I have no problem whatsoever with going for the touchdown on 4th and goal from the 1. And I know a lot of fans, I've had people take shots at me about that.
That's one of those things that you're second-guessing it if it doesn't work, because 31 coaches in the league would have gone for it.
Well, I don't know about 31, but any coach that is trying to win a football game goes for it there. I mean, I just think it's low-hanging fruit just to talk about that when Eli Manning threw for almost 300 yards against the defense. It was clear at that point a field goal wasn't winning the game. You had to score some touchdowns. And look, people will say, well, they would have only needed a field goal at the end. Well, that's also working under the assumption that all play calling is done in a vacuum and the score doesn't dictate what you're doing. And we know that's not the case either. So everything about the game changes based on any play or any decision that happens. I think it was a case where they give up the first long touchdown to Beckham, and you clearly saw what happened there. I mean, at that point, No Jimmy Smith. You're really concerned about your secondary. Hadn't gotten a pass rush all day. You get the 70-yard completion to Mike Wallace down to the 3-yard line, and you're going to kick a field goal at the 1? That's gutless. That's playing not to lose. That's not playing to win. And anyone who wants to compare this to a fake field goal or the inexplicable accepting of the penalty 2 weeks ago against Oakland, which those were both bad decisions, it's apples to oranges, because I think in that spot right there, you got to try to score a touchdown, because you see what's starting to happen to your secondary against Eli Manning and Odell Beckham Jr. And I think you can certainly question the play call itself, but from a conceptual standpoint, from a process standpoint, which is what you need to evaluate, you don't evaluate decisions just blindly based on whether it works or not, because I can go lay out in the middle of the street and not get run over by a car. That doesn't mean that's a good decision. So you look at game situation, flow, and I also think in that spot, if you kick a field goal, you're absolutely sending a message to your team that you don't have confidence in them. And I had one person say to me on Twitter that based on the fact that their offensive line was so banged up, there's no way they were going to get that. Well, if that's your mindset, you might as well go home then. This is a team that had almost 400 yards of offense, and they were able to run the ball good enough. Now, they didn't do it there, and clearly it didn't work right there, but that's not, by far, that I don't have an issue with that. What I do have an issue with, and how much of it's John Harbaugh, just because he's in charge of clock management, how much of it is Joe Flacco, probably some of him as well.
Oh, man, there's enough goat horns here for, I don't even know who's clear of the goat horns, right? Who on this team... Justin Tucker, I guess. He makes field goals. Morgan Cox had penalties on Sunday, right?
Sure, but I'm saying as far from a coaching decision standpoint, the Ravens, when they had after Brown kicks the field goal to make it a 20-16 game, they had just over 6 minutes to go, and the Ravens burned 2 timeouts on that touchdown drive to West. With just over 2 minutes to go. Man, you would have really liked to have another timeout in your pocket, at least when the Ravens got the ball back. But still, you look at that decision, you look at going for it on 4th and goal from the 1. To me, that's low-hanging fruit when you gave up a 66-yard touchdown with just over 1:30 to go on 4th and 1 when you had a chance to all but end the game right there. It was over right there if you make a stop. Even if they convert, it's still a case where make them go the length of the field at least. Don't just give it all up right there. So there's plenty of blame to go on the coaching staff, and I've been very critical of some of John Harbaugh's decisions. That's one that I was not critical of the decision. You can criticize the play call itself. You can criticize not executing, and even Terrence West said he wishes he had kind of put his foot in the ground and cut it back up, perhaps, and hit Pater instead of not getting there. But it just that's something I didn't have a problem with. But there's been plenty of coaching decisions made over the last few weeks that gets thrown into the mix of everything else that hasn't been good enough for this football team.
He is Luke Jones. You can find him, Luke, at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. The officiating, I sort of dropped that down to the bottom, and I'm going to circle back on wide receivers, O-line, D-line, Flacco himself running the ball, Terrence West. I'll get back to all that, but I can't remember a game where the Ravens, it felt to me like every time there was something I looked up on the screen and thought, well, that looks like it's going to go against the Ravens to my eyes. There were 3 times during the game where it looked like they won bets, quite frankly. It looked like the referees were trying to keep them in the game and give them an opportunity to win the game. I haven't seen many of those. I don't hear anybody bitching about the officiating, on Monday morning here, because that was the most favorable officiating I can remember.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
On big plays. Really big plays, like the drive that put them ahead.
Yeah, you can't complain about that. I don't think there's anything to complain about from other than just maybe the sheer volume of penalties in general. But
by the way, if the Giants lose on 4th down and Beckham doesn't go the distance, everyone in New York is talking about that call.
Sure.
Everyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's the worst call of the week.
But you think about it. I mean, it's Tavon Young gets the interception on and looking at it again, did the feet get tangled up? Okay, but I've also seen that been called pass interference far too many times over the years. Not just the Ravens, but any team. The Perriman pass interference, which in real time I saw a jersey pull, I guess around the 15-yard line, but kind of ticky-tack. Probably, when you go back and look at it, if
give 50 yards,
objective,
yeah.
And even on the last drive, I mean the roughing the passer, which probably the right call. And I'll be honest, I only saw one replay of it.
Yeah, that was kind of obvious to me. You can't do that.
But it also wasn't. He didn't take 5 steps and level him where it was so. I'm just saying that's a big call right there because
drove him into the ground after the ball was long gone because the ball was kind of long gone.
Fair enough, but at the same time, it wasn't the worst one in the world that I've ever seen either. We're just going back on the fact that the Ravens can't point to the officiating at all. I mean,
no doubt.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That's kind of my point there.
That's why I moved it to the bottom of the list.
Sure. I mean, it's refreshing to not have to talk about the officiating because it's just
you've done enough of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of that. Plenty of moaning about that of whether.
Boy, you have a frustration in your voice that I rarely hear when you talk about officiating.
I mean, I get so tired of talking about officiating in general. I mean, there's, you can make an argument the only reason they beat the Browns might have been because of that taunting call on Terrell Pryor. If you remember.
I'll take it.
Yeah,
all day.
I mean, that's
give me more officiated games like Sunday, and I'll show you a 10-6 team.
Well,
maybe not. I don't know.
At the same time, 15 penalties. Both teams combined for 230 yards. I mean, that's just And Triplett's crew has a reputation for calling a lot of penalties. I mean, were some of them not penalties over the course of the game? Probably, but we say this all the time. How many times do penalties go uncalled over the course of a game? The officiating wasn't even on my radar in that game, other than the Ravens probably being fortunate on a couple occasions.
Luke, Flacco, and I know you sort of thrown it in with the coaching and where they are and where the confidence level is, and what to do on the goal line when you've got to get 18 inches on 4th down and you can't get it. Flacco is certainly a nice target here for a lot of the criticism because at the end of the day, he makes all the dough, and he is really struggling to have receivers open. I think at various points he's struggling to get protection. Just look at the offensive line they started. And that being said, he has not been real accurate with the football, not as accurate as he'd like to be.
Yeah, I mean, do I think Joe Flacco is high up on the list of issues? Absolutely not. That said, do I think Joe Flacco is doing a ton to help this team win, as much as you would expect him to do? Probably not. Look on that, in the fourth quarter, he missed some throws. The throw to Wallace on the final drive. I mean, there have been times where he's anticipated pressure and it's not there. The offensive line's certainly been a major part of the narrative. There's no doubt about that.
He got crushed a bunch early, and then it got better, but it got better along with a bunch of penalties.
Yeah. The penalties have been huge. And, you mentioned the wide receivers. I mean, I did like the fact that they took some deep shots, and clearly it worked, either with completions, as was the case with Perriman on the first drive, the 70-yard completion to Wallace, even though they came up empty-handed on that drive, and certainly getting some pass interference calls. I mean, that's why we've been saying this goes back to the Torrey Smith era. You throw it up and get a flag. I mean, that's the league. Whether it's right or not, whether it's the way the game should be called and officiated or not. That's not up for me to decide, but it's reality. That's why you do those things. But saw a lot of times where receivers aren't breaking open, and that's not just this week. It's we've seen that, and honestly, we've seen that over the last couple of years. I mean, it's kind of been Steve Smith or nothing in that regard, and that's not good, especially when Steve Smith's not on the field on Sunday. And we've talked about the fact that he's 37, and how much can you continue to go to that well without getting some more consistency from other receivers? I mean, it's just. It all adds up to not being good enough. And, to bring it back full circle about Flacco, he could play better. There's no doubt about it. I think he's been fine, but you're looking for more than fine out of your quarterback that's making that kind of money. I mean, that's just reality, because you've seen him play at a high level before.
Well, you're looking for better than 3-3. But again, he did engineer a winning drive. I mean, he did. I mean, literally, and the defense has spin it up a little bit. And I don't know what more you want than on the road with 4 minutes left, leading the team down. Now, that being said, there was a penalty involved, and it was not deft quarterbacking, so to speak, as much as it was good fortune and a call, quite frankly, which the Ravens could use those. Plenty have gone against the Ravens over the years. But I'm with you. He's going to get criticized on this. The responsibility is going to lay at his feet, and it's not going to be about the O-line and wide receivers getting open. It's going to be, did you win or did you lose? Because when they win, he wins. When they lose, it's his fault.
Well, and that's and that's something that so many people have talked about. The value of Joe Flacco over his first 5 years was they talked about the winning, right? Well, the winning's not happening as frequently as it has. And look, it's not his fault individually by any stretch. Just like it's not all John Harbaugh's fault. It's not all Ozzie Newsome's fault. It's not all the secondary's fault. It's not all Dean Pease's fault. It wasn't all Mark Trestman's fault. But all of this kind of adds up, and that's why I said it's kind of this mediocre malaise that they're kind of stuck in, that it just feels that way. And I felt that way last year before the injuries kind of just made things silly. This team lost a ton of close games early on.
Well, if these guys don't
year.
come back, it's silly. If Marshall Yonda's not going to play, and Ronnie Stanley's not going to play, and Terrell Suggs appears not going to play, and Steve Smith doesn't look like he's closer to playing, and you just go down the list, it's not far off of last year. I mean, last year was just capped with Flacco, right?
Yeah, and again, as far as we know, and we'll see about Suggs, and we'll see about some of these other guys in the coming weeks. The good news is these aren't the season-ending injuries that they've sustained necessarily, but at the same time, you go back and look at the Ravens late in the 2012 season. They had a lot of injuries, and you know what? They were able to come away with a couple big wins when they needed them. You got to be able to steal some wins even when you got guys hurt. I mean that's just reality.
Sure.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah, we're playing the Jets next week. They'll be hurt too, and somebody will win.
Yeah, I mean it's just you have to be able to do that. You can't just because what it also tells you when you have those injuries and you can't come away with some wins, especially against a mediocre team. And Odell Beckham's a phenomenal player. Eli Manning's career speaks for itself. He's a guy that, quite frankly, has been very similar to Joe Flacco over the course of his career. Only Manning has 2 rings as opposed to 1. But very
we can hope Flacco gets more similar.
Don't always put up great numbers in the regular season year after year. But that Giants team to me doesn't look all that good. So if you can't still figure out ways to win some games when you have some guys that are hurt, that tells me that you're not all that terribly good and you're not deep enough. And that's where we go back to the depth of this roster and counting on younger players to play and step forward, and young players become good, and their good young players become great. I mean, you need that progression. You need more guys to start stepping forward. This team right now desperately needs Zadarius Smith to start giving them a pass rush, and I'm just picking on him just as an example. But when you have Terrell Suggs who's going to be out, and Dumerville's already out, where's it going to come from? Where are they going to get that pass rush? When Steve Smith's out, who's giving them who's that guy consistently that Flacco can rely on to move the chains? I mean, these are very real questions, and these are fair questions. And if you don't have those things, then your roster is not good enough because you got to have some depth, and you're not going to have depth everywhere. And like I said, if they're going to be this hurt the rest of the year, then yeah, all bets are off. But you're going to have some injuries week to week, and you're going to have some guys that are less than 100%, and you got to be able to overcome that. And if you want to try to put a positive spin on it, they were missing 3 of their starting offensive linemen today, and you know what? They scored 23 points, and they had almost 400 yards of offense.
And they ran the ball okay.
Yeah, and that's not to say that that's good enough, but it at least shows that
it would have been good enough if they made one play on 4th down. I mean, it would have been good enough. It would have.
I mean, it's so
That's why the whole Chicken Little and everybody's freaked out. I mean, I get it. We've sat here and listed a dozen things that we could be concerned about, that they've underachieved, underwhelmed, underthought, underdelivered, undermanned as they were in the secondary against Beckham at the end. But all that being said, they were literally 1 4th down stop away from winning the football game. I mean, it's not like they went to the Meadowlands and got blown out.
Right.
Was it a little embarrassing? Hell yeah. I mean, coach screwed up, penalties, O-line, everybody took a noose on that offense. Everybody had a penalty, right? I mean, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's let's take a break because we got a lot of other. I want to come back and talk about the secondary because this is going to be one of the other stories this week because with all the other problems they had, Jimmy Smith now out, obviously Terrell Suggs out, and the pass rush going along with the secondary and how the defense is going to be faring. Maybe not against Ryan Fitzpatrick and the anemic Jets, but Tom Brady's down the line. Roethlisberger, you have to assume, is down the line, although Landry Jones has been playing. You can find him. He's Luke at WNST.net. Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. We've been going at it here, back and forth. There's plenty to discuss. We've got some baseball going on this week as well. I'll be out in Vegas with Mick, jamming with the Stones. You can say hello as well, but I'll be doing radio all week as well. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as on our YouTube WNSTV channel and in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault anywhere you are. Morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. every morning. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, breaking news happens first, including when it's Terrell Suggs at 10:30 on a Sunday night and biceps tears. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. More with Luke, more with some New York reporters, plenty of Giants, plenty of Ravens wrap-up, and maybe even a little baseball talk here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.